Chapter 2. "Lisa!" Malka yelled from the kitchen. "Look out the window for your father." Lisa went to the window of their second-story apartment, peering into the cobblestone courtyard. "Do you see him?" "No, Mama, not yet." Lisa knew what was making her father late. It was that gambling thing her mother got so angry about. He would stay out playing cards with some of the neighborhood men in the storeroom of Mr. Rothbard's butcher shop. Lisa didn't understand a thing about cards, but she knew they made her mother very upset. Abraham Jura had always called himself the best tailor in all of Vienna. Her father was a proud, elegant man who wore starched white shirts with tall collars. His customers had been Jews and Gentiles alike. But now, Abraham had few sewing jobs, and his longtime customers were turning up with less frequency. Gentiles had been forbidden to use Jewish tailors. A sign on his shop read, "Judicious Geskef," Jewish business. Sometimes, after she was in bed, Lisa heard raised voices coming from her parents' bedroom. The arguments were about money. That much she could figure out, and it seemed her father was angry at almost everyone these days. Gone were the early evening dinners and the bear hugs when Papa came home from work to greet his family. Abraham or no Abraham, Malka lit the Shabbat candles. It was Friday's sunset and the Shabbat was beginning. She lit 2 white tabers in the silver holders that had been her own mother's and turned to her youngest daughter. "Sonia, why don't you tell us what they mean?" "One candle is for the Lord, who made the heaven and the earth and rested on the 7th day," Sonia replied proudly. "And the second candle, Lisa?" "We light the second because we observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy." Malka lit 4 more candles, one for each of her 3 daughters, and one for her mother, Brindla, in Poland. A warm yellow light filled the room. Lisa's mother had a tradition of feeding the poor on the night of the Sabbath, and people would line up in the hallway an hour before sunset. This evening, Malka went into the hallway and said sadly, "I am afraid we have nothing to share tonight." Lisa was stunned. She watched the hungry people shuffle away and saw the sorrow in her mother's eyes. The girls joined their mother inside and began the meal without their father. When they finished, they watched Malka pull up the large mahogany rocking chair to the window. She rocked slowly back and forth, reciting her prayers, eyes focused on the street below. Lisa and Sonia awoke to loud noises, ominous noises of distant shouting. Throwing on their robes, they ran to the living room window and saw the sky was red with flames of burning buildings. Above the shouting came the piercing sound of shattering glass. Brown-shirted soldiers, Nazi stormtroopers, were running down the block like a band of outlaws, throwing rocks and bricks through windows. Dozens of neighbors ran out onto the street. Lisa saw Mr. Mendelssohn, the druggist, racing out of the building and watched in horror as 2 elite soldiers, SS men, picked him up off the ground, flinging him onto the glass-plated window of the pharmacy. She heard his agonized screams, jerked Sonia away from the window, and pulled her little sister back into the bedroom they shared. "Get under the bed and stay there," Lisa yelled. She ran into the hallway to search for her mother. Rosie had gone to Leo's. "Lisa!" She heard the cry on the stairwell and ran to find her mother holding her father's head in her lap. His face was covered with blood. His clothes were torn. "It's only a small cut, Lisa, don't worry," her father said when he saw her terrified expression. She took one elbow and her mother took the other, and they walked him slowly upstairs. Malka ignored the blood that stained the sheets and cleaned Abraham's cuts with a warm towel as he lay on the cherrywood bed she prized above all other possessions. Lisa gently picked up the shards of glass out of the folds of his clothing. "I was leaving Rothbard's when I saw a mob. They took turns smashing the windows, the biggest ones first, like it was for fun. Then they wrote nasty words in paint. They said, 'Juden, Juden Schwein, kill the Jews.' Then one of them threw a bottle with gasoline inside a building." Lisa was riveted by her father's terrifying words. I saw them drag people out of their homes. They took their things and burned them. Children that came into the streets were thrown onto the ground. When I was running past the synagogue, they were taking out the ark and throwing the scrolls and the Torah in the street and setting them on fire. He paused to take a breath, and there were no sirens. They wanted everything to burn. It was the night that became to be known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. More screams came from the window. They ran over and saw flames shooting out of the house on the corner, and the neighbors were forming a bucket brigade. "Malka, I need my shoes." She said nothing but walked into the bedroom and brought her husband his heavy boots. He laced him up and ran down the stairs to help. The frightened family stared out the window. They watched the bonfires grow larger as more and more books and possessions were added to the fires. Suddenly, several stormtroopers grabbed the men from the bucket brigade and dragged them onto the street. Lisa watched in horror as her father was forced to get down on his knees and scrub the dirty pavement. The stormtroopers yelled, "Schwein, Juden, Schwein," and kicked them when they didn't move fast enough. Malka could no longer bear the shame. She took her girls by the hand and led them to the bedroom, where they waited in silence for the terrible night to end.